So I want to bring in a guy who has studied this and has had a lot of say in how President Trump handled the southern border. His name is Stephen Miller. He was a White House senior advisor to President Trump. Comes to us from Washington, D.C. Now, you know a lot more about this than I do, Stephen, and I don't say that very much to guests on this program. I'm a know-it-all, all right? I never say you know more than I do in a serious manner, but you do. Am I making any mistakes in my initial reportage on this subject to set you up?
No, you summed it up perfectly.
So the industry is get the kids here, get the asylum seekers here, because if we didn't even go over that, but if you get to American soil and you say, I want asylum, they're going to keep you here, give you $1,100. You can go anywhere you want in the United States for 3 or 4 years until your case is heard, correct?
Exactly. When we came into the White House in 2017, in January, we inherited a system that colloquially was known as catch and release. It's a term everybody's heard. It's a term that I use quite frequently because it's a very accurate term to describe what happens. You show up at the border, you're apprehended, you're processed, there is maybe fingerprints that are taken, a cursory interview that is done, and then you're released pending a future hearing date. And the result of that, of course, is that smuggling organizations are able to sell transport to the United States very reliably. They'll say, give us $5,000, give us $6,000, we'll get you to the US border, and within a week, you'll be in Chicago, Los Angeles, New York City, somewhere else, wherever you want to go. Louisville, doesn't matter. And that is very lucrative for the organizations that are wreaking havoc, not just in Mexico, but also throughout the Western Hemisphere and certainly in the Northern Triangle.
Okay. Now, the children, this is a relatively new thing to get the children here so that their families can follow. How did you guys deal with that?
Yeah, so great question. So we began putting in place policies that effectively said, if you arrive with children, instead of being released, you're going to be detained and returned either to home or to Mexico to wait for your hearing date. Another policy we put into place was said, if you want to apply for asylum, you'll have to apply in a different country. So if you're from Guatemala and you want to apply for asylum, you'll have to apply in Honduras or in El Salvador. These policies effectively ended catch and release. In other words, instead of coming into the United States, requesting asylum, and getting a hearing date in 2 or 3 years, we presented you with a menu of different options. We said, you can A, go to Mexico and apply for asylum from there. B, you can go back to your home country. Or C, you can request asylum in a different safe country. Those were the policies that the Biden administration got rid of in the first 4 weeks. So that's the reason why you're now seeing this surge, this flood, because they've suspended the policy of resettling asylum seekers in alternate countries. They're now being released into the United States, and their hearing dates will be years from now, and they're unlikely to ever participate in those hearings.
Right, and there's 1.4 million cases pending now. That'll double, I think, in the next 12 months to about 3 million cases pending, which will take 6 years. Now, why does President Biden want this policy? Why?
So I think there's a few different things going on here. Over the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen the Democrat Party switch from being soft on immigration to embracing a total philosophy of open borders. And there's no other way to put it, in the sense that if you show up at the United States illegally and you simply say a magic sentence, you simply say, I want an asylum hearing, and you get released, how's that different from an open border? That's what the definition of an open border is. And we've seen that evolution happen, really, I would say, probably since 2013 until today, when we saw the first surge of young migrants, if you remember back to 2013, 2014. And instead of coming up with the plan to reunite them in their home countries, the Obama administration just had a 100% resettlement policy. Since then, the left has really taken over the Democratic Party, and they've adopted a position of completely open borders. I think the reason for that is because the left, the Democrats, they think illegal immigration ultimately is good for them because they assume that most illegal immigrants who either A, get amnesty at some point in time, or B, they have children, will shift the politics of the country further to the left. I think they also believe that having a sort of a captive low-wage class is also probably good for Democrat policy priorities versus having a larger, more robust middle class, which I think they think is probably better for Republicans. I'll make one other point on this, which is that in addition to that hardcore leftist attitude that's taken over the Democrat Party on this issue, I think there's also some extraordinary reckless naivete on the part of some in the Biden administration, where they were probably so foolish that they actually believed they could dismantle Trump's policies and that nothing would happen. That they actually believed they could get rid of our border security measures and the flood wouldn't come, that they could somehow charm their way out of it.
I don't
That's
think
proven
so.
to be a deadly mistake.
Yeah, I don't think they're that stupid. But Joe Biden himself, there's a mystery.
Right.
Because, he isn't a radical leftist. However, he surrendered totally to them. Any theories as to why?
Yeah, so that is the question, right? So is Biden being totally, completely controlled by the radical left inside of his own party? Or is this a case in which he is just hopelessly, completely naive, or both? My suspicion is that Biden has always been a weather vane for the Democratic Party. So whatever was popular or ascendant within his party over his career, he's been for. So when the Democrat Party had a brief period where they were tough on crime, and Biden said things that were tough on crime. And when he ran for president in the most recent cycle, and the Democrat policy was let everybody out of jail and be tough on police and soft on criminals, that became his new position. So I think he said, you know what, the Democrats are now an open borders party, and I'm just going to go along with that. I think that he probably did not appreciate just how disastrous the consequences of that would be. I think the people who are working underneath him, this is their goal. Let's be very clear. The mass entrance and release of criminal aliens and illegal aliens that are happening now with both the ICE and Border Patrol policy changes is the goal. So they're accomplishing what they wanted to.
Well, it's going to backlash on them. You wait and see. I know it will.